the Vice President of the European Commission on Values and Transparency, Vera Jourová. And this is a fact-finding mission in connection with the Conference on the Future of Europe. I wish to inform you that we will be broadcasting live on the Chamber of Deputies web TV and on our satellite channel as well. On behalf of the four committees, I wish to welcome Vice President Jourová. Thank you for being available. Let me just inform you that today's hearing is quite special because our guest is one of the three representatives of the European Commission, and I wish to inform you also that Madam Jourová's mandate also includes a number of key issues, including the guarantee that our democratic systems functions properly. We must avoid external interference. We must promote open and steady dialogue with citizens, representative organizations, and civil society. And it is important also to combat false information and misinformation, and we must preserve media pluralism and freedom of press. And it must also monitor the enforcement of the Charter of Fundamental Rights. In addition, it is important to coordinate initiatives of European citizens. In fact, it is important to be involved in the decision-making process, and there must be a guiding role played by all with regard to the follow-up after the conference. We know that the strengthening of European democracy is the topic of debate, and many citizens have submitted proposals on this. I am confident that in all these different areas, with today's hearing, we'll be able to cover a number of important issues that are even topical and that, in fact, are the object of differences at the moment. For example, the rule of law and the relationship between the right at European level and at national level. Now, we also have some MPs who will be following remotely, and those of you who are participating remote need to be visible, especially should you decide to take the floor. In the meantime, I would ask you to keep your microphones muted until it is your turn to speak. I would also encourage you to let us know straight away if you decide to speak, and those of you who are online can push your request to speak button. I'm happy now to hand over to Madam Jourová.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Honorable members of the Italian Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the opportunity to address you today here. I keep in high praise such direct dialogues with national parliaments, as we are living in very challenging times, economically, socially, but also for our overall democratic systems. I have to praise the dialogue with the national parliaments for at least three reasons, which are so prominent recently during the last at least 2 years. First of all, the Commission was monitoring very carefully what's happening under the emergency regimes in the member states. In other words, whether the emergency regime does not mean that the executive branch is switching off the powers which should scrutinize what the governments are doing, and it's the national parliament role. The second, for the rule of law report, which I will speak about later, it's very important to have a dialogue with the national parliament so that we understand to each other how we see the situation in each country and where is the space for some good development. And last but not least, the Conference on the Future of Europe, where the national parliaments are involved very actively, and which should result in the new kind of agreement on how European Union should evolve further. For the Commission, for me, it's important that President von der Leyen set out our priorities in her State of the Union address on the 15th of September. And it is clear what she said, that we need to move forward on the path to recovery and towards a fairer, healthier, greener and more digital society. That also means defending European values and fundamental freedoms, including the rule of law. These are my topics, which the President already mentioned before. I will start with the rule of law. To address rule of law concerns, we have gradually developed and used a series of tools. Among them, the rule of law report is an effective way to promote and uphold the rule of law in the EU by preventing problems from emerging or getting worse. It also allows member states to learn from each other through an exchange of best practices. From 2022, the report will include specific recommendations to member states, as President von der Leyen also announced in her speech. I am grateful to Italy for its support during the preparation of the annual rule of law reports, and I am looking forward to keeping up this cooperation in the future. For each member state, the Commission examined 4 areas which are essential for the rule of law: the independence, quality and efficiency of justice systems, the anti-corruption framework, media pluralism and media freedom, and other institutional issues related to checks and balances. Let me briefly indicate some key findings for Italy from 2021 Rule of Law report along the 4 pillars. The Italian justice system has continued to undergo a number of reforms aimed at improving its quality and efficiency, including laws to streamline civil and criminal procedures. Digitalization of the justice system continues to be developed, and human resources have been increased, with plans to further expand them. These measures are particularly important to address the serious challenges related to the efficiency of the justice system, including backlogs and lengths of proceedings. The draft law regarding the High Council for the Judiciary and other aspects of the justice system aiming at strengthening judicial independence are still pending. It is important that these reforms take into account the Council of Europe recommendations. Italy continues strengthening its legislative framework to fight corruption and corruption-related crimes. But challenges remain, such as lack of resources and limited experience and legal expertise that affect the capacity of law enforcement authorities to pursue and prosecute foreign bribery effectively. Several legislative proposals and amendments to strengthen preventative measures against corruption are pending, including on conflicts of interest, lobbying and revolving doors. Italy has a robust legislative framework regulating the media sector, as well as an independent, well-resourced and effective media regulator. Italy's scheduled reform of its defamation laws remains pending, and some issues of concern relate to the political independence of the Italian media in the audiovisual sector and also the attacks as well as other forms of intimidation against journalists. As regards checks and balances, the emergency regime related to the COVID-19 pandemic has been an important topic, as in many member states, and I am aware of discussions on how to strengthen the role of Parliament during emergencies. It is important to follow up on these findings at national level, but also learn from other member states' experiences during the regular dialogues in the Council at the level of ministers. Of course, your institution holds a key role in passing the necessary reforms, as we saw recently with the ones regarding the criminal justice system and civil justice reform. I was also very happy to see that Italy included reforms and investments to improve the efficiency of the Italian justice system in its recovery and resilience plan. I can see that these reforms are keeping you particularly busy, and I wish you all the strength in advancing the work. Let me now turn to the European Democracy Action Plan, which aims at protecting democracy against today's threats. For instance, it is difficult to uphold fundamental rights and democracy in a largely unregulated online space, especially when the business models of social media platforms do not always encourage free and open debate. We elaborated in the European Democracy Action Plan ideas to better protect our democratic systems, make our societies better prepared for the challenges of the future, and our democracies more resilient to the spread of disinformation. The European Rulebook on Digital is an answer to that. With the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act, and the already mentioned European Democracy Action Plan, we will hold platforms and big tech accountable. We increase transparency and empower the users. And we do this without violating the key principle of freedom of speech. To give you one example, further efforts are needed to ensure free and fair democratic processes, including in the context of the next elections to the European Parliament, as well as between elections. One of our flagship initiatives for this year relates to online political advertising. We are convinced that people must know why they are seeing an advertisement, who paid for it, how much, what micro-targeting criteria were used. New technologies should be tools for emancipation, not for manipulation. To this end, we will propose legislation on transparency of sponsored content in a political context, the so-called political advertising. We will also revise the rules on the financing of European political parties. Some measures could be included there on the use of the political advertising at a European level to make sure that national and European oversight is coherent. Through the European Democracy Action Plan, we also want to strengthen media freedom and media pluralism. Independent media play a crucial role in the fight against disinformation and against the manipulation of the democratic debate. We recognize the essential role of journalists in providing us with reliable sources of information and in holding power to account. No journalist should fear for their reputation, economic survival, or safety when doing their job. We have recently adopted a recommendation on safety of journalists, and it is now for member states and their authorities to implement it. But we are also looking into how to protect journalists against abusive litigation initiated to silence them. We are therefore currently gathering the elements to shape an initiative to tackle strategic lawsuits against public participation. And last but not least, as announced by the President von der Leyen, we are working on an initiative to protect media freedom and pluralism, which will focus on increasing the independence of the media authorities. Media and civil society are the watchdogs of our democracies, and we need to ensure that they can continue to exercise this role within a favorable environment, without constraints or political interference. This brings me to another important topic for Europe and for all of us, the Conference on the Future of Europe. National parliaments bring an important contribution to the debate on the future of Europe. They know very well how different issues resonate back home and can help promote people's participation. Members of the Italian Parliament also participate in the conference plenary, which holds its next session on the 2nd and 3rd of October. Discussions will mostly touch on the first insights from European citizens' panels, reports from national panels and events, and the European Youth event on the 8th and 9th October. Italian participants are making a valuable contribution, mainly in the form of generating new ideas on the multilingual digital platform of the conference, and we want even more people to participate. Grassroots events organized all over Europe are another pillar of the conference and a crucial tool in reaching people from all walks of life. I would encourage members of the Italian Parliament to organize events for their constituencies, announce and report on them through the multilingual digital platform so they can be picked up. I would like to underline the importance of promoting the platform and raising awareness of the conference. I would love to see members of the Parliament engaging in the debate personally, organizing events if possible, and spreading the word on the conference across their constituencies. Honourable members, Mr. President, thank you very much for your attention, and I very much look forward to your interventions. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you very much, Madam Jourová. We'll begin our questions. I've already got some requests here. Those of you who are following remotely should press the raise your hand button so that I can hand over to you. President Stefano, Chairman Stefano, now has the floor. Thank you, colleague. Good morning, Vice President. Thank you, Madam, for being here today. Let me just make a couple of remarks. The dialogue mechanism on the rule of law is key in the European system. The European Union is not simply an internal market. It is also based on fundamental rights, democracy, and the rule of law. There are mechanisms for sanctioning under Article 7 of the treaty, for example, or in the infringement procedures as well. And there are also mechanisms based on preventative dialogue, for example, in connection with the rule of law. Now, clearly, we do prefer dialogue because it also helps us to gain experience, exchange experience, and it is a term of reference within the Union. And peer-to-peer dialogue is always the best instrument in helping us understand differences, in sharing best practices, and in analyzing problems together in the broader European framework. Now, the treaty, in fact, speaks of respecting the constitutional identities of each member state, of respecting the constitutional traditions, and respecting common values. Now, these must be respected before joining the Union, the Copenhagen criterion, and especially during membership. Now, considering the current situation, I'll just focus on one issue. The supremacy of European law is one of the fundamental principles of our common home. And when a member state takes a position which jeopardizes this principle, the European Commission must take action strenuously. And the Commission must use all the tools that are available. I think that the prime tool would be the infringement procedures. The Commission decided to institute this for Germany after the May 2020 decision on the European Central Bank acquisitions, and I think they did the right thing. But we've got to consider the states, and I'm referring here to Poland in particular, the states that jeopardize through their decisions and through their constitutional tribunal the principle of the supremacy of European law. Now, the dialogue mechanisms are not always sufficient, and we need to use the tools in order to sanction the failure of states to abide by these and that are envisaged in treaties. It is important for our common coexistence, as it were. Now, we must avoid restricting our fundamental liberties, and our generations have enjoyed these since the end of the war. And to close, let me also highlight that the decision-making process is essential with regard to protecting our public health, but this must not override any consolidated power, which would include parliamentary oversight, which we must all guarantee. Thank you very much for your attention, and again, I wish to thank you for being here with us today. Thank you, and now the Deputy Chairman, Madam Orsini, has the floor. You need to turn on your microphone, please.
Ok? Ci sente?
Can you hear us now? We'll try again a bit later. We cannot hear you. I'll hand over to Mr. De Luca from the Democratic Party now. Unfortunately, we cannot hear our colleagues. Maybe we're having technical difficulties with our remote connections. Okay, we can hear you now. Thank you very much, Chairman. Good morning. I also wish to extend my greetings to Madam Jourová for agreeing to our hearing today. This is very useful and interesting. And I must say that I appreciated the reference made repeatedly to the work carried out by the Commission and Madam Jourová. And you were talking about the rule of law and guaranteeing our democratic values, which are an important feature of our membership in the European Union. Now, in this time in history, I think it is important to work together, member states, national parliaments, national governments, the Commission, the European Parliament, and the Council as well. We must all work together to reassert the idea that the Union cannot simply be viewed as a free trade area, nor as a hybrid player in the evolution of its existence. We know that the outcomes have been exceptional. In any case, we need to assert these democratic and principles and values, and we are all united by the rule of law and democracy, not only by our freedoms and our fundamental liberties, which have been the main feature of our success since the end of the World War. So this is why we think that the clause is essential. The clause included last year in July on the rule of law for the approval of the national recovery plans. We think it is a decisive, a defining clause. It is key. And as Chairman Stefano was saying, we are considering this now in connection with the recovery plans of Hungary and Poland in particular. I think that we must make any effort that we can in order to consolidate the presence of member states within the Union. We have to be convinced of this and do it firmly and strenuously, and we must avoid any more Brexits or any other possibilities which would create a new historical phase. So we have to consolidate the presence of the member states in Europe, but we need a dialogue, a strong political dialogue. We need to speak out in favor of the rule of law and demand it. We do have tools within the European Union to do so. So my question is this: are you considering on an infringement procedure vis-à-vis Poland? Because of the Supreme Tribunal ruling with regard to the primacy of the European Union law, and the independence of the judiciary, for example, is another issue. We do remember the issue that was raised with the Polish Supreme Tribunal, Supreme Court, and this legal issue was also raised before the Court of Justice. So it isn't just a question of legal formalisms, but it is a substantive matter. Now, my last point is this. It's a question, or rather a statement. I think this is so. In any case, we're happy to hear from you that you are pleased with the reforms that Italy has included in its National Recovery and Resilience Plan. And in this connection, I would ask you what your assessment is of the state of implementation of this, of the reforms, of the first phase of the reforms. And do you think that the reforms indicated in the National Plan are as important as they seem to be? We at the Democratic Party do think they are, and we think we must continue pursuing the Draghi agenda. We need to pursue reforms together with strategic investments that are envisaged in our National Resilience and Recovery Plan. We would love to hear some words of comfort and support and reassurance coming from you. Of course, there is a very lively international debate going on right now and will continue in the next few weeks. Thank you. Our colleague, Mr. De Luca. Let me try again with Madam Orsini, Deputy Chair. Yes, we can hear you now. Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, Madam Jourová. Thank you for your remarks this morning. This is an opportunity for me to ask you two questions. Many of the phenomena that we see today in connection with the National Recovery and Resilience Plan and in connection with the recommendations made by the Commission. So these phenomena, I was saying, go over and above national borders. And I'm referring here to terrorism as well as fighting one of the most worrisome phenomena, i.e. the rights of children, and in particular pedophilia. We know that these are phenomena that occur through the new technologies and through the social media. So these are two topics that I'm focusing on. I'm wondering what is being done and is there any progress? They have to be seen as cross-border phenomena, and therefore they require us to be more integrated in coming up with intelligence and any actionable instruments. We know that sometimes they occur on national soil, but one state alone can no longer handle these issues in any defining way. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Chair Orsini, now MP Vigna from the League Party. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Madam Jourová for your very interesting remarks. Now, hopefully the Conference on the Future of Europe will become an institution which will help us to overcome the age-old democratic gap within the European Union. We know that the goal is to bring the European institutions closer to the peoples of Europe and its citizens. We hope that this will all be achieved thanks to the Conference on the Future of Europe. I am an MP coming from the north of our country. In my region, I would say that we have mountains. These are at times considered marginal areas because we don't have large cities. And when it comes to digitization, we think that the goal should be to have a uniform situation throughout the continent. So equality between the larger cities and the more regional areas, the outlying areas that are so extended. So two questions. One on the rule of law. The European institutions, and in particular the Commission, I'm going to ask you a question on this. Have they ever considered that this policy on the rule of law and the fact that the European Union can judge individual countries and can judge the level of democracy in individual countries on the basis of ideological parameters? In other words, it would be based on whoever is in charge in Brussels. Might that result in some sort of democratic distortion? Let me explain what I mean. A party can run for elections in a European country. That party may be seen as not abiding by the values of the European Commission. So Brussels has a leverage vis-à-vis national states. I mean, there is financing or any cuts in financing, and do you think that might influence elections in that country? In other words, the other party running, which perhaps is in line with the values of the Commission, might turn to the citizens, and during the electoral campaign, they might tell citizens, vote for us, because if the other party wins, the European Union will cut financing and we won't receive any money. Now, don't you think this is dangerous? Do you think this might result in more Brexits, for example, and pushing citizens even farther away from the European institutions? And there are two specific cases in two countries of the European Union. We would like to know what you think about these, and if there is an official position taken by the Commission on these cases. So there are two countries where I was saying, where it's not that politics are interfering with justice, but we think that politics are interfering, that justice is interfering with politics. We have the Salvini case here in Italy. He is being prosecuted for having performed his duty as a Minister of the Interior. And then we have another case, which is Puigdemont in Spain, in Catalonia, who is being prosecuted by the courts in Spain, basically for having been the first to organize a key demonstration with a huge turnout involving most of the people in his region in Catalonia. So these are two specific cases, and I'd like to know what you think about those, Mr. Salvini and Mr. Puigdemont, if you agree to that. Thank you. And now I'll hand over to Senator Garavini, who is following remotely from Italia Viva party. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to Madam Jourová for your overview and for your remarks on the importance and the key role of the Conference on the Future of Europe on the one hand, and on the role that parliaments have in implementing this. So I would agree with your points there. I have a couple of direct questions on the development of the conference itself. In other words, what kind of participation is there on the part of the people? Are there differences in different European countries? Are you pleased with the participation and the contributions being made? Now, in the meantime, has Europe set up an information campaign in order to disseminate information on the conference itself? And in particular, I'm referring to the younger generations here. And would you be able to give us a sneak preview of the main areas that you are focusing on? And is there any way that you can identify areas for proposals to be made? And one final question. Do you think that the European Union is assessing the possibility of extending the duration of the campaign? Because we see that the pandemic, that the COVID pandemic is ongoing, is continuing, and this, of course, has hindered and slowed down any participation. And basically, up to date, it has been impossible, nearly impossible to meet physically, to meet in person. So do you think that you might be extending the conference itself? Is that an option or not? Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator. And now I'll hand over to our colleague, MP Sensi from the Democratic Party. Over to you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I must say that I wish to thank Commissioner Jourová for her remarks. You underscored in your remarks that freedom of the press and the safety of journalists in performing their work are key are basically two sides of the same coin, the freedom of citizens and democracy in Europe. And I'm thinking here of what's happening in Poland, in Hungary, in Slovenia, for example. Now, there are reasons for concern, however, in other countries as well. Malta, Holland, the De Vries case, for example, and also in Italy. I would say we have a situation here which is quite burdensome, and in particular I'm referring to journalists, not only during these demonstrations. In any case, we're seeing the no vax and the no green pass demonstrations, and there have been cases of intimidation and threats as well. Journalists are becoming more and more the enemies of some violent minorities. So I would like to know, Madam Commissioner, if you might like to go over this. Again, you referred to a recommendation. So what more can the European Commission do? Of course, it is monitoring the situation. You're very close and you're supportive of what is happening to journalists. But what more can be done? And one final question. In Italy, there is a lively debate going on with regard to the signing of referenda, the digital signing of referenda. In fact, one of our colleagues, Riccardo Maggi, submitted an amendment recently resulting in this innovation. It isn't only a procedural innovation, but I would say that it has triggered a debate on the issue of representative democracy and direct democracy. So I was wondering if you've had a chance to follow these developments at all and what you think about them. Thank you very much, Madam. Thank you to our colleague, and now our colleague Madam Grillo, who is connected remotely from the 5 Star Movement. Yes, I hope you can hear me and see me. Thank you. Okay, I'll try to be quick. I have some questions on the conference on the future of Europe. And in particular, I'd like to know how some opposing positions will be settled. For example, federalization or the use of a single language. And there are other issues which are important all over Europe, impactful issues, such as the creation of a single European broadcaster in order to raise awareness on EU-related issues, and also the European Constitution. We know that it would not be the first attempt to have one. In any case, I think it is important in terms of unification, and also a European army. And my final question on one of the topics that has already been raised is privacy and safety in using social media. This is a topic that has come up, and I consider it to be important as well. Of course, it is linked to the recent revelations of a former Facebook engineer who provided information on all sorts of studies that had been carried out by Facebook in connection with the incidence of the use of social media on the psyche of youth, the psychological impact, and how invasive it is. So I was wondering if you have an assessment on that. I would be very interested in knowing if there are any European actions that are being considered. Thank you. Thank you to Madam Grillo. And our final question will be our colleague, Madam Galizia, again from the 5 Star Movement. Over to you. Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Commissioner, for being here today. We know how difficult it is to be present physically, and I apologize for the fact that I'm not there today. Now, many of the issues that I wanted to raise have already been touched upon by my colleagues, so let me be very brief here. It is important to understand what data we have on participation in the Conference on the Future of Europe, and I'm interested because I'd like to know what kind of communication, how effective the communication has been. I'm trying to organize an event in my region where we talk about these issues. I want to engage citizens, and I would therefore like to be the spokesperson in my region. I'm encouraging citizens to register on the platform, as the Commissioner herself was saying, and I would like to have a better understanding of how many, in fact, are engaged, how many have registered, and how many are willing to engage in a dialogue and raise these issues, which will then be discussed in the plenary session. So I think it would be very important maybe to have a regular report, for example, on what is happening, and the members of parliament who are participating also in the plenaries, so that we can have a clear idea of the issues that are being debated. There are so many issues, after all, so many topics on the agenda: the rule of law, and the resilience of Europe. And I think that at the moment there are two key issues that we have to debate with regard to resilience. One is health, and my colleagues have already mentioned this, and the other is energy. So health and energy. We're talking about the green transition, so energy, of course, is very high on the agenda of the European Council as well. So we have to be concrete in our work. The shortage of raw materials and having to resort to alternative energy sources and natural energy are becoming more and more of a problem. So we have to deal with this not on an individual basis, but at European level altogether. So this is where I hope we can be well coordinated, because otherwise it will be very difficult to come up with any other solution, I think. So the other point that I'm interested in is what will happen after the conclusions are drawn at the end of the Conference on the Future of Europe. How will they be followed up? I think this is a very special time. We need a leap in quality, and there has to be some sort of change. In other words, we cannot just sit and wait. We have to hope for a concrete outcome, because that way we know what sorts of approaches to take for the future. Thank you. If we have no further questions, then I will hand right over to Madam Jourová so that she can reply. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you all for the questions. What a wide range of questions and really important topics. I will try to answer all. The timing is... How much time do we have?
No problem.
Until 10.
Okay.
Wow, it's a lot of time. So maybe we could have a dialogue afterwards. Yes. So, President Stefano, thank you very much for very clear questions on, I think, absolutely an existentially important topic for the EU, which is the respect for the principle of the rule of law. For many, it sounds just academic and theoretical. Rule of law, what it is. I really try to explain everywhere I go to the people who are not lawyers, who are not politologists, why we need the rule of law principle to be respected in every member state, but also to be respected by the Commission itself. We play by the cards we were given by the legislators through the Lisbon Treaty. I absolutely agree with you, President Stefano. EU is not just a single market. And if somebody wants to come back to this concept, he will not be successful. But the tendency to have a good agreement on the economic things, where we can do compromises, where we can have consensus, it's much easier than to keep high the consensus on the values, including how the rule of law principle should look like, how the respect for it should look like in the member states. So speaking about the rule of law, we speak about the basic architecture of the EU. And the architecture is based on several main pillars. And one of them is that there is the primacy of the EU law within the competencies of the EU over the national legislation. And the highest, the supreme arbiter of what is legal and what is not legal is the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg. This is something we agreed on. And all the member states joining the EU agreed with this principle. And whenever we see and we witness the decisions taken at the member state level by the constitutional courts, and here I mean the German Constitutional Court in May 2020, which was mentioned here, and now the Polish Constitutional Court decision, we have to act. And we acted in German case. We launched the infringement procedure, and now we expect the reactions and proposals from the side of Germany. We are analyzing the court decision from Poland, and I don't want to predict, but very, very likely we will react in the same way as we reacted on the German case, because the infringement procedure is our basic tool we have in our hands. And we will have to substantiate, explain what is, in our opinion, wrong in this case with the decision of the Polish Constitutional Court. Polish Constitutional Court, which on top of everything has been questioned when it comes to its independence. The composition of the Polish Constitutional Court is one of the issues which are discussed under the Article 7, which have been discussed by the member states. I think that we have to bear also in mind all these aspects and the broader context. So, you asked, Mr. President, what are the possibilities to keep the House robust, to keep the pillars and to protect the pillars of this European architecture. First of all, I believe in dialogue. We have dialogue with Poland. We have some dialogue with Hungary, although Mr. Orbán said that he doesn't want to speak to me, because I said that it's not illiberal democracy, that it's ill democracy in Hungary. And I insist on my words, because there are some elements missing in Hungarian system, which create democracy as such. So we have the dialogue, and I'm very often accused of being too soft by the European Parliament. You know, this rule of law agenda, it's, I think, one of the most ungrateful agendas we can work on, because for some, we are doing too much. We are invading into countries. We are trying to oppress the sovereignty. We do not respect the sovereign power of each member state. And for others, we are not doing enough. We are neglecting our role as the guardian of the treaty, as the guardian of this basic architecture. The Commission is doing the following. We are doing fulfilling our obligation to address the issues when they come through the legal measures like the infringements. We are continuing the dialogue with such member state, and we do not take ideological angle. And it was your question, Mr. Vigna, whether there is ideology in it. I can declare here that we expect the respect and keeping the rule of law principle from liberal or conservative governments alike, because there are basic standards which have been based on Article 2 of the treaty, which have been explained and interpreted in many decisions of the European Court of Justice. What are the parameters of the rule of law? What are the parameters of independent judiciary? What are the parameters of independent and impartial judge who has to do its job in every member state, because national judge is also European judge. Judges in member states, including Italy, are applying EU law. That's why, rightly so, the European Court of Justice has something to say on the independence of judges in the member states because they are applying European law. That's also part of the basic architecture. So we have a lot of definitions of the standards which every country should keep and protect, whoever is governing the country. It's not ideological. It's bipartisan or multi-partisan approach. So we have the dialogue, which is ongoing, and for some, it's the evidence of weakness of the Commission that we have the dialogue. We have to talk till the end of the days. We have the infringement procedures. We launch them only when we have very solid legal ground that we might win the case. When it comes to rule of law disputes, the Commission has won all the cases up to now, because we never served to the table of the European Court of Justice the case which would be weak as for the legal grounds. And I cannot afford to lose such cases, because what is at stake, it's not only that I failed when it comes to the legal procedure, but it would mean that I, from the side of the Commission, started maybe to think ideologically. It might be the sign of it if I lose some case, that we overshoot, that we are stretching, enlarging our competencies. I really don't want to do that. I myself come from the country which is very Eurosceptic, and I am Euro-realist. But I also want the EU which will obey its competences and the limits. I would even say that we Czechs would like to see light touch European Union. Light touch in the sense of let the EU really tackles with the issues which the member states cannot do, and let's leave everything else for the states, for the regions, for the municipalities, for the people. My career started in the small municipality. I think I have under my skin some feeling what should be done at what level, because I worked at the municipality, region, ministry, and now I am in the Commission. But sorry, this is not a hearing about Jourová, this is the hearing about principles. So I just want to explain that we are really considering very carefully how far to go, because indeed, rule of law, it's also about constitutional checks and balances. This is the sovereign state matter. But we also have the obligations of the sovereign states as the member states of the club, which agreed on some rules. So coming back, can you imagine I'm still with question 1? But I'm also covering what some other members asked. So dialogue for me is first. Infringement procedures. Article 7. At some moment, we had to put the problems which we see in Poland to the table of the member states, because the Commission cannot stay alone with it. And Article 7, it's the European, the Council of General Affairs, where the ministers from all the member states are sitting, and they have to express how they feel about the problems in Poland and Hungary when they seem to deviate from the principles. When we had the last hearing on within Article 7, it was in heated atmosphere just a few days after Hungary adopted the law on education, where, in our view, they stigmatize the LGBT people, their own citizens. LGBT community are individual citizens who have full rights, who should have full rights in our member states. And it showed that the debate on this matter showed that this is not just a legal issue. This is the political issue, and this is the issue relating to fundamental rights of the citizens, which require thorough discussion of the member states. And if you remember, I think it was only 18 member states which signed the declaration that they find this Hungarian law problematic. 18. And just imagine Article 7 needs unanimous vote about there is something wrong in the concrete member state. Unanimous vote. 27 minus 1. We would need 26 member states to vote for some sanctions against concrete state. We are not there at all, because there is always a group of the states which openly say we don't like what's happening in Hungary and Poland. Then we have some silent part. There is partly always the geographic solidarity from some states. Simply Hungary and Poland have allies, including my country, who will not vote against them. And then there are those who openly defend the positions of Hungary and Poland. So it's not easy. And Article 7, in my view, will not lead to sanction. And I think it was the lack of imagination of the legislator who designed the Article 7 like that. On the other hand, I would not like to live in the EU which would easily sanction some states. It could also be dangerous. So that's why also, because Article 7 is not fit for the purpose to impose the necessary push on the member states, that's why we propose the conditionality, the connection between the money, the EU funding, and the rule of law principle in the country. The conditionality is now usable. The regulation bringing this principle is in force since the 1st of January this year. We are assessing the member states. We will apply the conditionality when we see clearly that in case there is a breach of the rule of law, in the sense, for instance, of the inability of the state to judge by means of independent judiciary, to judge the cases of corruption and fraud, for instance, then we will have to apply this conditionality principle and launch the procedure which might result in decreasing or freezing the money for the member state. And Mr. Vigna, is that dangerous? Might this lead to some exits of some member states? It will depend on how the people in the member states will take it. Whether it's the bad Brussels doing something to us, or it's the irresponsible leadership of this country, which is not able to guarantee the protection of the European taxpayers' money. Because this is about the protection of European taxpayers' money. Your money as well, because I guess still Italy is the net contributor to the EU budget. The willingness of the leaders of the net contributors countries to keep paying and to see that their money is used by those who are breaching the basic principles, the willingness was decreasing over time. When I came the first time publicly with this idea of connecting the money with the budget, with the rule of law principle, it was in spring 2017. It was a huge scandal. Jourová said we should connect the money with the principle. It was in Vienna, I remember very well that day. I was scared myself about what I said because I had a very harsh reaction from Portugal, from the Netherlands, many other countries through the ambassadors. This is the principle we don't want in Europe. And now you see the regulation was adopted. Because in the meantime, between 17 and 20, the situation worsened, and the taxpayers became more nervous and more dissatisfied that their money go to the regimes which are in breach with the rule of law principle and fundamental rights. So this is about the protection of the EU funding, and I hereby declare that we will apply the conditionality in a very careful way only when we have a very solid ground to say that the system in some member state does not protect the EU taxpayers' money sufficiently. And the process will be long, because we launch the procedure, then the country, the member state has a chance to react, then it can be brought to the table of the European leaders to discuss the situation, and then we need a qualified majority vote in the council, in the respective council, which might lead to the sanction. And by the way, it would not be the first time the EU is freezing the money. I don't know if it happened to Italy already. It happened to Czechia many times, that the Commission said, no, your audit and control system does not work well, so we freeze the money. I was the Minister of Regional Development who inherited the frozen EU money. Believe me, I had to really work hard to convince the bureaucrats in the Commission, who I hated when I was the Minister of Regional Development, that our system works well and that the money will go to the right places without any waste or any corruption or so. So we will be very careful in using this conditionality, and I think that there are big expectations that we will deploy this tool as well. Mr. De Luca, indeed, I have already touched upon it. He said that we have to guarantee democratic values in the EU and that we have to work together. I will 100 times sign this because we neglected something incredibly important, that we lived in a naive idea that democracy and the rule of law and related principles will protect themselves, that it's automatic, that we are at the end of history. Liberal democracy, the end of history. It will live together forever because the people must understand that this is the best ever system. Of course not. We have to convince the people, the voters, again and again, that this system works well for them, that everybody has equal rights which are enforceable, that the system is fair because nobody is above the law. So all these, do you agree or not? I am not sure about the reactions. But I want to say that the Commission cannot be alone with it. The infringement procedures, they cannot simply protect democracy. Forget it. This is very limited. So that's why I think that we have to work together, especially to keep people with us. When I see the surveys in member states, around 40% of people announce to us, democracy does not work for us, does not deliver the prospects and good perspective. What the people complain about is insecurity and injustice, and now newly in COVID and post-COVID time, the inability to pay the bills for the gas prices, for instance, or heating. So what are we speaking here about? We speak about democracy as the system necessary to deliver good life to people. And if they lose trust, we cannot do much through the procedures and top-down rules. So I think I spoke about the need of dialogue because Mr. De Luca said also, what are you considering to bring the countries back? Well, I think I described that. We don't want any further exits. I was in Poland at the end of August. I spoke to many people who said to me it would be a disaster if we leave EU, and well, I think that we have to do everything possible. Mr. Vigna also, what I think about Mr. Salvini and Mr. Puigdemont's cases. Of course, I think something about that, but I don't have the power and the appetite to say publicly what I think about individual cases, because we care about the system. And this is the field where the Commission can and have a say, or has to protest when something is wrong. But these are individual cases where I think, for many good reasons, the Commission should not pull its nose into. Yeah, so it's not for me to say what I think about that. Mrs. Garavini, whether I am satisfied with how the Conference on the Future of Europe works, young people engagement and so on, and whether it can be extended as for the time, because indeed, as you said, the conference started late due to pandemic, and it should be wrapped up in spring next year, so relatively short time. In my view, we should continue the platform for gathering opinions and also registering the events. I don't see any reason why we should stop it, because it shows that it is a good thing to have such platform open. We have now, if I'm not mistaken, around 4 million contributions. The contributions are geographically and as for the gender rather imbalanced. So that's why we try in the member states where there is a lack of interest to encourage the people to contribute. And we want the people to have contributions on 10 topics, which we pre-designed. Plus there is, I think the 10th topic is any other topic. For the moment, the biggest interest is in the topics of democracy, values, the security, health, digitalization. Migration is rather low. I am surprised by that, but that's the picture we are getting. There is, under the topic of democracy, there is the issue of institutional setup at the European level, including the way, for instance, the president of the Commission is elected, the famous Spitzen, how do you call it in Italian language? Spitzenkandidat. Do you also use this horrible term? It is really discouraging, no? I use more the lead candidate. We are discussing also this one, how to elect also leader, yeah. And so the conference should be wrapped up as for the plenary and the direct participation of the national parliaments members and the panel of citizens. Why in spring next year? Because if there will be conclusions that there should be some changes of the legislation, we will manage still to catch it in spring 2022 and do something about that, to prepare the proposals still in this mandate, not to leave it for the next Commission. So high time to do that from spring 22 on. But for the platform, I think that we could have this as a permanent structure. Still, one comment on the voting system for the European Parliament. In case there will be a prevailing opinion that there should be the system of Spitzenkandidat or even the transnationalists, in case we will see strong push for that, the legislative initiative is on the European Parliament. It's not the Commission which should propose it. And the European Parliament already voted on these matters, and the support was not very high. So we shall see. Mr. Sens? Okay, the media, well, yes, we have several major journalists in the EU. It's Malta, Slovakia, the Netherlands, Greece, and let's not forget Charlie Hebdo in France. And the attack, a horrible attack, with the aim to silence the journalist and to decrease the quality of the freedom of speech. I think that we have to do more to protect the journalists. We are not in the situation when the media should hire the private security agencies. It's for the states to guarantee security of the journalists. That's why we issued a recommendation for the member states with many practical measures which we would like to see done at the member state level, including something which sounds obvious, that the police will deal with the announcements of the journalists that they are under threat. Because there was a negligence at least in Slovakia, I think also in Malta, there were announcements that the journalists are being blackmailed and there are threats online, and there was no special protection, and they were murdered later. So we issued the recommendation with very concrete items, including, for instance, that the state should provide the journalists the expertise and technical help when their IT system is attacked, because not everybody is equipped, or to provide shelters and psychological help. We simply need to do more to not to have the journalists but also injured journalists in the EU. So there are also recommendations how to guarantee security of journalists in the protests, for instance. Digital signing of referenda, it was still Mr. Sens. Thank you for this question. I am a lonely sheriff in the Commission who wants e-voting. Because I believe that if we want to keep the attention of young people who went digital in many things they are doing, if we want to keep their attention and if we want to move them to go and elect, use their citizens' right to elect, we have to go digital as well. I cannot help it, but the old-fashioned habit to go somewhere with the paper, well, some say that this is a social event. I'm afraid that the young generation will not be with us on that. So but again, it's my personal opinion that we should really try to digitalize democracy and democratize digital. There was also a question on how to deal with all the bad things in online world. And I think that we might do it in a safe way, especially after we will have the e-identity of each citizen guaranteed through good rules, which we are preparing now, and good technological measures. I believe that if we invest in security and individual e-identity option, we can do that. So I say yes, but we are not many. And every time we speak about that, I am referred to Estonia, which is it's a fantastic digitalized country. Yeah? I sometimes think that it's Estonia. And they say themselves, yes, we introduced e-voting, but there were problems with it, also relating to security. They live near Russia, which has a lot of efforts to also use cyber attacks and of course, disinformation against us. By the way, disinformation, the more you go to the east of Europe, the more the issue of disinformation is on the table of the ministers of defense. Yeah? On the west, it's not taken so much as a security issue, but the proximity of Russia which is so well equipped to organize the disinformation attacks on Europe. This is becoming the defense issue. Madame Galizia, Madame Grillo, again the COFE, single language, European Constitution, common broadcasting, European Army. Indeed, these are the topics which are heavily discussed under the Conference on the Future of Europe. And I cannot predict what the result will be after all taken as the one, because the plenary will vote, will have to take on board the opinion of the citizens panels. Then the plenary will vote, and then the executive board, where I am sitting, will have to endorse the conclusions. And I myself take it very seriously that the conclusions of the conference have to be taken on board. So we will see how creative the conference will be, how courageous, how visionary they will be. We will see. It's in my view, very needed and interesting experiment, and something we had to do, to ask the people how they want Europe to look like in 10 years' time. Last comments, privacy and safety on social media and the announcements of the whistleblower, Frances Haugen. I spoke to her last week, the one who informed about what's happening in Facebook. I have to say, I was not surprised by her announcements. We predicted that there are bad things happening, that there is still the priority of making money than behaving decent and safe, providing safe services for the users. And I have to say that in the Digital Services Act, mainly, we really in Europe try to predict these things and cover them in the legally binding rules. So Frances Haugen announcements are more eye-opening moment for American legislators than for European one, because we already proposed legislation. Mrs. Galizia, and yes, I know I'm too long. I'm still on time. Few comments on what we want to do on social media, and especially in relation to children. I am sometimes very nervous when I hear that there are expectations that the law will solve this problem. Let's forget this naivety, because the law, of course, is needed. We need rules, because when we see Mr. Zuckerberg to switch off sitting president of the United States by his own private decision, well, I don't think we want to continue this madness. Facebook and others are governing this world, and we need to take it back. So that's why we came with the rules, with the law. But it is not enough. We have to invest in education, resilience of people, not to believe everything they read on internet, for instance, to think over, and to maybe work also with the facts, which should be somewhere available, somewhere close in the system. Then I will always scream when I hear that some law should protect the children. It's the parental responsibility first of all. And when we are in the situation when TikTok is the mother and Instagram is the father, I think that there is no law which will protect the children. And so there should be some campaign to inform the parents what they should do to protect their own children against all the threats and risks which are waiting for their children online. So there must be combination. I don't want to be alibistic in saying we don't need rules. We do not need rules, but there is some work for everyone. And last, Madame Galizia, I hope I have the name right. Was it? Yeah. How effective the communication has been regarding this, again, the Conference on the Future of Europe. First of all, Madam Galizia, I want to thank you for your plan and effort to organize some events and to have the discussion under the maybe framework of the Conference on the Future of Europe. It's really great. We have registered many thousands of events, but I forgot the number. There are events organized all over Europe from different layers. Nobody is coordinating it. It's very spontaneous event and activity. And indeed, there are all the topics covered. You mentioned health, energy, green transition, especially in the current gas crisis, I think that we have to have a dialogue about that. But first of all, on gas prices, yesterday the Commission adopted the plan how to support the member states in their efforts to ease the situation of the citizens in this very, very difficult time. So I will not go into details of that. And I know I skipped Madame Rossini. Cross-border crime, it's incredibly serious issue. In the EU, we see more and more how the organized crime is interconnected, the cross-border scope. That's why we are increasing capacities of Europol and Eurojust. We are increasing the ability of the electronic data sharing systems and interoperability of these systems. Of course, we need cooperation of the secret services, which is not organized by the EU, because this is a sovereign state matter. It's more for them to do more. And especially the phenomena like terrorism or child abuse, there is still space to do more, and we are first of all now focusing on stricter rules for money laundering, because money laundering always leads to big international crime, and we are focusing on freezing the assets from the organized crime when the assets are moved from one state to another. We have the legislation on that. And last but not least, we are focusing now more on the crime which is committed by means of digital tools. So we want to decrease the possibility to use online networks for terrorist content sharing and child abuse materials. And here we are ahead of a very difficult discussion on child pornography, because now we have an interim regime when the platforms should detect such material, remove it, and announce it to the police. But they are doing it more or less randomly. And we have on our table now the idea that they should do the permanent surveillance and checking of the whole space under their remit, whether there is the appearance of such material. And of course, this is a horrible dilemma between whether to guarantee better the security and protection of children, or whether to keep the high protection of privacy. So we will have to find a proper solution somewhere in the middle with the proper guarantees that the privacy will not be a victim of this fight for having more safe children. Difficult things. Thank you very much. You were extremely patient and attentive. I very much appreciate at least the chance to see the real people reacting, not always agreeing with me, but thank you very much. It was very important for me to have this chance to share with you how I see the situation and way forward, and I would wish to keep very good cooperation with you in the future. Thank you.
Grazie a lei, Vicepresidente.
Thank you very much, Madam. I must say that your replies have been extremely interesting and very thorough. It is always excellent to be able to meet physically, and hopefully this will continue now more and more. Thank you again very much. Thank you to all our colleagues for their participation. Our hearing is now over. Thank you.